ladies and gentlemen, good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning even, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to part 3 of the Israeli documentary film series that we are so delighted to bring to you under the auspices of the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies at Concordia University. My name is Csaba Nikolenyi. I'm the director of the Institute and also a professor at the Department of Political Science. And I'm delighted to also welcome many of my students from the Israeli politics class that is running currently by remote teaching at Concordia this semester. I would also like to, of course, recognize my assistant, Jennifer Solomon, who is back from maternity leave for some months now, and without whose help and contribution, we would not be able to make the this technological wonder come about. So before we would start tonight's, this afternoon's, this morning's program, I'm going to ask you to please make sure that you mute yourself, you close your video, please put yourself on speaker's view when the film begins, and also please take a close look at the upcoming slide that Jennifer is going to show in a moment, which explains to you how to press your hide thumbnail video bar at the top left of your screen. Just look at Jennifer's illustration. And if we all do that, that is going to give us an even more enjoyable screening experience than otherwise it would be the case. Today's presentation is the film, the documentary Menachem Begin, Peace and War, a film that was directed by Levi Zini. Following the film, we are going to be fortunate to be able to welcome Levi to a live question and answer session. He graciously offered to join us all the way from Israel, and we hope for a very interesting conversation with Levi. Before I would turn the screen over to the actual documentary, I'm going to actually, what I would like to do is to read out to you very briefly Levi's statement, because it is going to frame, I think, the presentation and the meaning of the film. There have been many films, many documentaries made about the late Prime Minister Menachem Begin. I think that Levi's statement is going to help us understand what is special about the perspective that he wanted to take in terms of presenting this material to you. So, and of course, we will be able to probe him further in the Q&A. So this is what Levi says about the movie. On the day Menachem Begin entered the Prime Minister's office, he was asked, "What style of Prime Minister are you going to be?" "Jewish style." "Good style," he replied. What is a Jewish style? How is that separate from Israeli style? And is there any difference? These questions were the starting point of my journey to unravel Menachem Begin's contradictory character and leadership. In my youth, my father and I used to wrangle over politics on Shabbat. My father would support Begin with loyalty, while I argued against his policies and his ghetto mentality, which seemed so far from my Israeli mindset. My immigrant father, Levi Zini, fled from his home in Morocco to join the fight for the creation of Israel. What led him was not Zionism, which is a Western national ideology, but rather a deeply rooted Jewish sentiment, a yearning for Zion, a sentiment that was deeply absorbed into his identity, like many Jews of Islamic countries. Soon after arriving in Israel, he experienced a deep sense of cultural alienation from Israel's socialist founders and their Labour Party. He found his voice under their bitter opponent, Menachem Begin, and made him his idol. My journey to tell Begin's story stems from those old arguments with my long-gone father and my attempt to try and reconcile between us. It has brought me a new understanding and acceptance of the sentiments that my father so strongly protected, even if our differences about Israel's future shall remain unresolved. Ladies and gentlemen, now we give you on the screen Levi Zini's Menachem Begin, Peace and War. Jennifer, over to you.
Just 1 second, please.
Screening, and it is our pleasure to welcome Levi Zini, the director of the film. Let me just make sure that Levi is here with us. Just looking, Levi, are you there? Are you joining us from Israel? Let me just see where our director is.
I'm here.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
Levi. Erev Tov, I can hear you and we can
But you can't see me.
We are trying to see you. So let me just ask Jennifer to help us.
Just give me 1 second.
Find your, I'm also looking for your video.
I have no idea why.
Just turn on your video now.
I can see you now.
Here I am.
Csaba, do you see him?
Not just yet.
He's on the screen.
Oh,
So go ahead.
yes, here we are. Here we are. Levi, welcome, and thank you so much for your willingness to stay up at such a late hour that it is in Israel. I certainly thoroughly enjoyed the film. This is not the first time I had the opportunity to see it. Of course, very thought-provoking. Before I would ask members of the audience to start thinking of some of the questions they might have, and I would like to invite them to perhaps start submitting their questions in the chat. Let me say a few words about you, who you are. We have seen your film. I did share with the audience your statement that you provided with the film, the statement about the conversation that you continued through this film, with this film, with your late father. What I would like to say now is a few words about you, who you are, and then maybe open it up with a few questions from me, and then we'll turn it over to the audience.
Okay.
So, Levi Zini is a leading documentary filmmaker in Israel with more than 40 years of creating independent films and television documentaries in a variety of genres, including art films, docu-activism, and current affairs exposés. Between 2009 and 2013, Zini served as Chief Commissioner of Israel's premier documentary channel, Channel 8. Zini is a recipient of a variety of awards from local and international festivals. He was awarded Israel's Minister of Education Award for documentary filmmaking in 1999 and 2012. Zini is a board member of the Israeli Documentary Forum, a lecturer, and a judge for film funds and festivals. He is also founder and art director of Dog Films, production house in Tel Aviv. It's such a pleasure to welcome you remotely to Montreal, to our Institute's event, Levi. I guess by way of opening up the conversation, what I would like to ask you is to contemplate and maybe think out loud with us about that conversation that you started with your father. You told us that this movie, in the statement, you told us that this movie made you appreciate your father's perspective perhaps a little better. So it seems that your film brought some of the Begin critics that you probably were, as you said you were, a little bit closer to the other side. But what about the Begin devotees, like your father was once upon a time? What about others who were as loyal to him as your father was? Do you think your film brought them a little bit closer to taking a more critical view of the late Prime Minister's achievements?
I would say something about it in a different way. You know, the winners write the history. So till 1977, the left party in Israel wrote the history, and in this history, Begin was, let's say, doesn't take place. I mean, it wasn't very important for their point of view. And there is a question of identity in Israel. I usually say that the problem in Israel is that Zionism, which the left party brought to Israel, is a European ideology. And the people, the immigrants that came from the Islamic country, like my father, he arrived to Israel from Morocco, doesn't know what Zionism. They have a yearning to Zion, which is a religious feeling, religious willing to come back to Israel, to be in Israel. And between those two things, between what we called in Israel the democratic and the Judaism, that's all our identity as a Jewish and an Israeli is all the time in a kind of a conflict. Am I Israeli? Am I more Jewish? Because there is no difference between religious and nationality in the Jewish state of Israel, it's something that all the time has a conflict. What I understood about Begin is that at the first I was Israeli, of course. That's what as we called it then, tzabar. And then came this, let's say, diaspora ideology and way of speaking, and I couldn't connect him. And it took me a lot of time to understand that what Begin tried to do here in Israel is to find the balance between Judaism, between the religious and the democratic state. And he tried to balance those two very powerful, I don't know how to call it, they very powerful, and he tried to balance them and to find the way that they could live together. And it took me a lot of years afterwards to understand it. And that was really kind of, I said one more thing that just catch me in Begin, in his first day, when he came to the Prime Minister office, a reporter, which is a story by himself, asked Begin, what kind of Prime Minister you are going to be? And he said, Jewish, simple, Jewish, in the Jewish way. And I couldn't understand what did he mean by Jewish way? Is it there is a difference between the Israeli way? What he means by that? It took me a long time to try and understand it. And that's what I really appreciate today in his character and his time of being Prime Minister. And I'd say another thing, which from different angle, the character, Begin is a character, Begin human being, not political for a moment, is a dream come true of a scriptwriter. Because, you know, he was as a young child, after he met Jabotinsky, which I hope the people that are listening to us know who he is. If not, please go to Google and check it, because he's a very important person. After he met him, he was about 13 at that time, he decided to dedicate himself to the state, to build or to be founder of the Jewish state. And he was intend to be a leader, to lead. And at his youngest, he quite succeeded. He was a leader in Betar, and then here in Israel, when he arrived running from the Holocaust in Europe, he became the leader of an Etzel. How do I call it? It's underground,
the underground military
British.
of the right. Yeah.
Yeah, and till his dream come true. I mean, the state of Israel come to life, and then he was sent to the backseat for about 30 years, which is I assume was very, very disappointing for a man that was intent to be the leader of this kind of and he lost 8, if I remember correctly, 8 elections made, and he's keep trying, and again keep trying, and then he got the will in his hands to lead, and he tried to lead for a different way that the Labour Party did before. And again, the beginning was amazing. He signed the first peace treaty with Arab country. And then I think it's a kind of let's say arrogant, he took us to an arrogant or hybris war in Lebanon, which was a big, for my opinion, is a big mistake. And in Israel, there is a narrative that actually Ariel Sharon pushed him to this war, a narrative that I don't accept at all. And he finished his way in a kind of his life in a tragedy. He left the prime minister office very sad, very weak, very disappointed from himself. So to a scriptwriter, it's a fascinating material to write about. And I think he's a very interesting person, and he was quite unappreciated most of the time in Israel. Today, while we see the leaders of this time, everyone appreciate his modesty and his is willing to work for the people. But he was more than that, no doubt. He changed in a way in his peace treaty and his bloody war. He changed. He influenced the area very, very, very much.
If the conversation continued, the same conversation that you had with your father, if it continued with the next generation, our children's generation and grandchildren, today's youth in Israel and in the world, certainly in the Jewish world where there is interest in Begin, what's the message of the film? We understand the message for you. We understand the message for your parents' generation. What about today's youth? What is the message that you think this film is trying to communicate to them?
I hope they will try to go in Begin's way to find the balance between religious and nationalism. We'll try to find the balance in any way, in every way, because it's a very conflict place. I mean, there is a lot of the identity still now between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim. I hope you know what I'm speaking about. Mizrahim, it means people, Jews that immigrates for Islamic countries, and Ashkenazim, they came from Christian countries, and between religious or not religious. Till now, we are just today. It was again in the newspapers, everywhere, arguing about this problem. It's part of our life. I don't think we at the moment know what is our identity, and we are searching again. If we look abroad, what is the relationship between the people in Israel and the diaspora, the people abroad, not in Israel, the Jewish people out of Israel? And again, there is a mixed and a lot of conflicts between it. I think Begin all the time try to find the balance, the balance even between capitalism and socialism. He tried to, and that's something that I do appreciate, and I think, I'm not sure the people in Israel admire these things. That's what I wanted to point them. He was trying to find balance between conflicts, and it was great. It is great. It was great, and it is great.
Levi, I was hoping both this time and the previous time when I saw the film, I was hoping and looking for the voice of his son. Why did you not bring him in?
The voice of whom?
His son, Benny Begin.
Benny Begin didn't want to participate. He said, we had a lot of talks, and I have a lot of things that off record from him. But he said that it's not correct that a son will speak about his father as a prime minister. I mean, he said, no, that's why his sisters didn't participate. He was against it. But you should understand that in a way, Dan Merido and Aryeh Nahor look at Begin as a father, as not a biological father, but as a ideological father. And they loved him as sons loved the father, really. And they are trying to protect him here and then. But Benny Begin didn't want to participate. I tell you more. I asked him, because we had quite a good relationship. Mm-hmm. I asked him to watch the film. And then he told me, I watched, but I'm not going to tell you nothing about it. He's very, very, how do you say it, stubborn. But he is very funny. Yeah.
Levi, we start getting questions in from the chat. So why don't I start sharing these questions with you and with the audience? And if there is a break, then I'm going to bring in additional points that I would like to run by you. So we have a question from Jules Sarna from Montreal. And Jules would like to know what you think Begin would think of today's peace agreement signed between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain.
I think, like most of us, he was said, okay, fine, because it's great that the Arab countries all around slowly accepting Israel as part of the area. Even it was a kind of economic deal. It's good. I think he feels the same about it. But actually it didn't change a lot of our position in the area. And no doubt, even whatever here the people in Israel will think, it's not going to solve our main issue with the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian. That a conflict that we should find the way to solve, and Begin himself was very, very worked hard to find a way how to solve it, because he understood, he wanted the Holy Land, all the Holy Land, but he understood that there are people on this Holy Land, and we can't, and we should, because he was so democratic, he understood we can't use them as in an apartheid way. So he tried to solve, and he came with a kind of solution with the autonomy, which was a part of a way to solve it. It didn't go far. It's a pity, but it didn't go far.
Levi, can you tell us a little bit about the reception of the film in Israel and abroad? What has been the response? What were the kinds of reactions that you received from the two different audiences?
In Israel, what we broadcast as a series of 3 episodes. It was in the public channel, and it was quite a lot of people watch it. And what they do here, they put it in the internet. And there was about about 5 million viewers of the series. And I had a lot of good things, mostly because that, when they come to you, they come with the good things. There was a little bit of argument, because I claimed that in Lebanon war, Begin was Begin and Sharon did it together. They did it. It wasn't that as the narrative that usually thinks here. It wasn't that Begin was Sharon pushed Begin to do it and so on. And Begin was part of this war all the time. He was aside. He has to find a way to let Tzahal to bomb a capital, Arab capital, for 12 months, for 12 weeks, with no superpowers that came and say, hey, stop it. He was working on it. He met Reagan through this time about 5 times, and he in a way he participated in this bloody war, no doubt. Even they are trying to describe it like Sharon was a pusher and Begin was a poor man that Sharon cheated him. I don't agree with it. So I was out of what we are used to think about the war. And by the way, at the moment, I'm finishing the same format about Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, very interesting as well.
And what about the reaction abroad? Have you had any reaction to the film from audiences?
I've been it's a pity because we send it for distribution in January 2020, and I have been in few places in Miami. I've been in Paris. I've been in London. Good, but then comes the Corona, and actually I don't really know. I had some Zoom conversation. is I think all around we are missing such leaders. It's not just in Israel. It seems to me that all around people are missing such leaders that really care of the citizens and not caring for themselves. And today we'll know what's going in the state to see what they think about such a kind of leaders. So it is, in a way, it was very interesting, and I had a lot of very interesting conversation afterwards, after the screening.
There is another question coming in through the chat from Elaine Lazarus, who is joining us from Toronto, I believe. And Elaine has a very interesting question, which is political and but connected very much to the film. So here it goes. Do Israelis today consider the giving up of Gaza, the evacuation from Gaza, a big mistake, or was it worth a peace with Egypt? And would Begin likely look back at all of this? Would he regret it? Would he defend it?
I don't know what Begin will think about it. I am very, 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 very glad that he did it. I mean, we are part of this area, and we should live in peace with. I finished the film with the speech that Begin gave in when he got his Nobel Prize, and I think a man that said such things will be glad that this is that's the way it is. I say, and I'm glad. I'm personally very glad.
Let me take an opportunity of the presence of a dear colleague in the audience, and I hope he's not going to mind. We have this wonderful opportunity. We have Professor Zev Rubinowicz, who is joining us from California, I believe. Zev, of course, is co-author of a recently published biography about Menachem Begin that he co-authored with Jerry Steinberg in Israel. Zev, if you are willing to join in the conversation, I would very much like to ask you to tell us how the documentary, how the movie that you've seen shaped your views of Begin. How does it differ from the Begin that you wrote about and you published in the book? I'm trying to bring you into a conversation with Levi in an improvised fashion. And if you mind it, we will never talk again. If you don't mind it, we'll be friends for many, many more years to come.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Csaba, and thank you for the movie. Indeed, I'm in California. The guys here, I guess, are voting now in the numbers. Well, it's not a biography that we wrote. It's actually it's an analysis of the peace process from Begin's perspective. I mean, the one that we never had, because everyone wrote about this except for Begin himself. So we had the fortune of seeing the documents in order to get a better sense of what they actually were into. And first of all, I have to say, Levi, about the footage that you had, I think I saw this in Hebrew, this whole film when you produced it in Israel. I saw it probably online because I'm here in California, but I did see it, and the footage is wonderful. I mean, to see the original footage from many years ago and trying to get a better sense of how things were going. I have to say, well, obviously in making a film, it's difficult to get into the nuances of what everyone was thinking of. I mean, if you would have focused only on the Camp David process, then I would have been able perhaps to correspond more tightly to this, because that would have been exactly what I was doing in the book. But definitely, I think Begin had in a way, a problem, but he also had an opportunity. he had already, you know that in 1975, Israel and Egypt already had an interim agreement where they started to mend their relations, let's say, with a partial withdrawal. And Begin comes into this, and now he understands what Sadat wants. Sadat wants all of Sinai back. And rhetorically, he wants also to talk about the Palestinian issue, but Sinai is more important. And Begin is exactly the right person for this. And this is something that Sadat understood and Begin understood. This is why they could get to this, because Begin was willing to give up on Sinai. For many years, he was willing to give up on Sinai. He was part of the agreement of the resolution in the unity government in 1967 that put all of Sinai as a deposit for peace. And now he is the prime minister in 1977. He's basically saying, we're back to that position. I don't agree with my army, with the IDF, that we need the eastern strip of Sinai from Eilat to Sharm el-Sheikh, Ophira. We don't need that. If it's demilitarized, I'm satisfied. Sadat understood this, and this is how they started talking.
I would like to ask you a question, if may I? May I ask a question?
Of course.
Let's speak about Camp David for a moment, because there is something that I try to understand if it's just a legend or it's true. They say that quite near the end of the conversation, they called as a Weizmann and his I forgot his name, called Sharon. And they asked Ariel Sharon to call Begin and tell him that he will agree to move the settlements from Sinai. I think it's bullshit. And actually, some conversation I had with Benny Begin quite convinced me that it was it's bullshit. But still, there are few people that that mention it again and again and again. It was such a conversation? Does even everybody knows that everybody listening to every single phone call that goes out from Camp David or Camp In, all of the Egyptian, the American, the Israeli, all of them put every phone call, listen to every phone call. Does it really has a meaning there in Begin, in your opinion?
Okay, it's a good question. We do have the documentation. Yes, the phone call did take place. It's indeed, it was an initiative of Levi Zini, the defense minister, and Abrashat Amir, the general of They were close to, Tamir himself specifically was close to Sharon from the army times, so they made the connection. And yes, he called to tell Begin that he supports the move, including the moving of the settlements if needed. He actually told him that they were doomed already in one of the previous government decisions that had to do with one of the steps towards Camp David, before Camp David. And now he does that, and the importance here is that once Begin knew that it's not only he, Dayan and Weizmann who will support this move, although I need to say that Begin himself did not want to approve. Dayan and Weizmann said, we will support pushing the settlements, removing the settlements. Begin refused to do that and even warned that in the Knesset discussion, he will not say his position, but he is against removing them. But once he knew that Ariel Sharon, who was the mobilizer, the bulldozer, right, of building settlements, is in favor of this, he knew that a lot of opposition will be broken within the party and with the coalition. We have the documentation that this indeed happened. And was it a tipping point or not? I can't really say, but it does seem that it was part of the convincing of Begin that this move can work. Although, you know, later on when the vote came, you showed a bit of Geula Cohen's fighting with Begin in the Knesset.
But it's
one third of the coalition voted against Begin. He was saved by the opposition.
In Israel, that's what nice in Israel. As I said before, at the moment I'm making a film, the same about Ariel Sharon.
Yeah.
And again, it's a right-wing leader that, like Begin, that when he come to power, understand that maybe the left side was correct. The boss was a leader that moved or tried to move towards kind of a peace, because Sharon is not peace, but he came against a very important value in Israel, the value of the settlements and the conquered the land.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I can just add to that. Two things. One is I'm actually telling my students now, and I have a class in about an hour and a half with them about the 1980s, but I already told them when I talked to them about Begin last week, and I'll talk with them about Sharon next time, it's always prime ministers from the right who have to fight with their own constituents over the future of settlements wherever it happens, because it happens under them that because of their positions, things happen. I mean, political moves happen. Sharon was the one who eventually removed the settlements in Sinai and later on in Gaza. The great constructor was also the great destructor of settlements. That was him. Later on, you know very well that people who later on started resenting Sharon as prime minister because of his move in Gaza remembered that he actually comes from a labor family. He was not a real Cherut person. He was never. He always saw things through security eyes, and this is how he also viewed the future or no future of the Israeli settlements in Gaza. That was his point. And this is something that connects also with Begin. Yes, that they understand when they are in power, they understand that the realities, I mean, some of their perhaps dreams or ideologies they cannot fulfill, and the price will be very heavy. For a leftist party, it's easier not to go for peace because perhaps there are expectations, but you understand their constraints. When it comes to the right, immediately there's a backlash from the world, from the U.S. Let's say that they must push Israel into peace, and therefore they must also get to they nail Israel in a way, an Israeli government to decide on a few things that they would not want to do definitely, but they have to in order to to save face in a way.
What a treat, ladies and gentlemen. We couldn't have rehearsed this better, to have the Israeli documentary filmmaker joining us and telling us about Menachem Begin from Israel at this late hour, and then the professor, the expert, the scholar from California, who just published a book about Menachem Begin, and us at the Azrieli Institute in Montreal, sitting in the middle, connecting it all and bringing it to you. Zev and Levi, thank you so much. You've been wonderful. Next time, I will insist we always try to improvise if it works so well. You've been great. Thank you. Levi,
thank you very much. Thank you
for making the film, and thank you for staying up to join us and share your perspective with us. And Zev, have a wonderful class. And please, once again, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, before I say goodbye to you, please join the screen, take a look at the screen. Jennifer is showing slides about some of our upcoming events. We started already this week an Israeli current affairs series in collaboration with the Cumming Center. They take place on Tuesdays, no, on Mondays. That's right, Monday mornings from 10:30 to 12 o'clock. We are planning, publicity is not available yet, but if you want to save the date, on November the 22nd, we are planning a discussion about the relevance of the US elections for Israel. We are still working on confirming the final arrangements. However, December 3rd is confirmed. On December 3rd, we will have a book event, a virtual launching of a new book about the Kotel, the Western Wall, brought to us by Dr. Doron Bar, the president of the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem, and Dr. Kobi Cohen-Khattab from Bar-Ilan University. And after that, of course, we, like the rest of the university, will be entering examination mode, and we'll be getting ready for the winter break. But please stay tuned, because we try to spoil you with many more exciting events, even during the remaining months of the year, and of course, a lot more in the months to come in early 2021. Once again, Levi, Zev, thank you so much for being here with us today. Jennifer, as ever, thank you for all that you do, and we hope that the little one is not keeping you up very late. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you, and we certainly look forward to seeing you again at our upcoming events here at the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies. Please stay well, and above all, stay healthy.